This is a broken extruder lever from my Neptune 4 Pro. I guess I was using it too much, changing out the filament too often on my Neptune 4 Pro, and eventually the lever broke, thus becoming useless. I did reach out to Elegoo about the problem, and after sending them some information, they said they would send me the lever for free because it is such a cheap part. You just need to bear shipping costs. I thought, how much can shipping cost for this little thing? Apparently it's $15 or $26 for a little tiny lever, and it would take 2 to 3 weeks to get here. I was not going to wait. Thus began my adventure into printing new pieces, breaking pieces, and learning more about how print orientation matters when it comes to strength of your parts. Today I'm going to print off some little test pieces to show you how the orientation matters when it comes to printing your items or your objects. I'm going to use some random columns that I printed off, as well as a functional part that I had to myself tweak in order to get the strength that was needed. I'll also showcase a figurine that I printed off where I had to be careful about the orientation that I used in order to get strength in the fingers so I can successfully remove the parts. Let's get started. On printables, I found somebody else already had the same problem, and they designed exactly what I needed to fix my Neptune 4 Pro. And if you look closely, you can see the layer lines here whenever they printed it off. What's interesting is that whenever I downloaded the STL file, this was not in the same orientation as it is shown here after being printed. Here I have the STL loaded up into Bamboo Studio so I can get ready to print. Whenever I first downloaded the file, it had one piece and it was orientated like this. And I have no idea why. But I went ahead and I printed it off because that's the way that it was in the file. I got it installed, tried to use it once or twice, and it snapped right in half. Now the important thing to note, it's going to be hard to see on this probably, but because of the way that a 3D printer works, it starts printing from the bottom and goes layer by layer as it stacks up, putting layer by layer on top of each other. That essentially creates a weak point. Where it broke on those layers, is right where it snapped, because even though they adhere together, it still creates a bit of a weak point in the print. I went back and I reoriented the piece so it is laying down flat like this. And as you can see now installed in the printer, that is the exact piece that has been installed in there. I've printed many hours and many filament changes since installing this new lever, and I've had 0 issues since then. To give a more simple example, I'm going to print off these 2 shapes here that are just basic shapes that I added directly into the slicer. I do want to try to make things fair and even. So I'm going to set them both to 2 wall loops, but there's another thing to consider is the wall loops are going to be around the sides, but the top and the bottom are by default set to different layers. I don't care about the top and the bottom on this, we're not testing that, but by having that be here, I'm actually going to get a different result, because by default the top shell layer is 6 and the bottom shell layer is 4, which means you're going to have 6 layers on the top and 4 layers on the bottom, which is going to give this a lot more strength inherently than this one would have anyway. So keep that in mind whenever you're doing this, is the number of walls and the number of layers around everything is going to also impact the strength of it. I want to make this fair. So I'm going to set the top shell layers to 2 and the bottom shell layers also to 2. That way whenever I print off the one laying flat, we're truly going to have 2 walls around the entire shape of it, both sides, the bottom and the top. Otherwise, again, this would give it kind of an unfair comparison between the one laying flat and the one standing up. Now, keep in mind, again, the way that a 3D printer works is it prints off layer by layer by layer, stacking on top of each other, and then that stacking on top of each other creates an inherent weakness or break point, because even though the layers are adhering together, they're not going to have as much strength as one continuous strand of filament being laid down. So by orientating it in this direction, the filament is going to be laid down all the way across the length of the object, giving it a lot more strength when you're putting pressure on it from side to side. Let's get this printed off and see how it works. All right, so here we have the 2 pieces printed off and ready to break. I wrote S on one for the one that was printed standing and F for the one that was printed flat. So let's go ahead and try to take the one that was printed standing and see if I can break it. That broke fairly easy with that whole lot of pressure. No, I'm not doing a scientific test here. I don't have the tools for that. So I'm just having fun with this. Now this is the one that was printed flat. Let's see if I can break it. This won't break. It is starting to bend and get a weak point in it because I'm bending it back and forth. But even now, it still has a lot of strength in it, bending it back and forth. There, that is my very scientific way of telling you that print orientation matters when it comes to strength of your prints. Let's go on to show you a quick thing about a figure that I printed off and was having a lot of trouble with. This is a tiny Demogorgon, and this has a lot of fine parts on it that was extremely difficult to get printed off correctly without breaking. In particular, its fingers. It was very difficult to print this off and get the supports off of it because the fingers are so small. If you take a look at the print file here, you can see that by default it is printed standing up, which means that the fingers are going to be printed layer by layer, building from bottom to top, which creates an inherent weakness in those fingers, especially whenever you're trying to remove the supports from it. It was extremely difficult. So instead, I did this. I tilted this creature sideways so that some of the fingers could have more of a horizontal printing orientation, because by having that horizontal printing orientation there, it's going to provide more strength for the fingers. And realistically, this also provides more strength for the entire figure because you're going to have longer print lines throughout the entire print for most of it. And with this, I was finally able to print this guy off and remove the supports successfully. It was a fun learning adventure as I was going through, and I hope that what I can share here can help you along your journey as well. So there you have it. There's my very scientific explanation for you about why print orientation matters, especially if you want to consider strength of your print, or even when you're printing off figures, it can be beneficial to go ahead and lay the guys on their side and deal with the supports later. Have fun, print more.